Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast. Lehr with me, your host, Imperial Dane. With the topic of the day being the 234 Puma heavy armoured car, schwerer Panzerwagen, armed with a 50mm gun and a minor machine gun there in the coaxial mode. Also a bit loud, isn't it? Anyways, German heavy armoured car, part of the new Mobile Defence Commander, costs 270 manpower and 80 fuel, making it more expensive than a Stug E or a Stug G. So, what do you get for those resources? Well, you get essentially what's a peculiar sort of tank destroyer in a sense, though not necessarily what one might expect from a heavy armoured car. It's essentially only really useful against armour. I think with a bit of veterancy, though, I believe it becomes better against infantry, but still that requires you sort of handle armour first and sort of get it there. They can of course also handle light vehicles quite nicely. But versus infantry initially, it is not very good. It is in most cases not going to have a vast effect upon your opponent. It also possesses a few abilities. It has, well, Panzer, but that's thanks to the commander, of course, but you might as well consider that part of it. Plus, you've got target weak point. So you've got something here that helps with maneuverability, and you've got something that can help, you know, limit your opponent's maneuverability if you use it correctly. It also has a reasonable high range. I believe it has about the same range as a Stug or a Panther. It is noticeably more mobile. It's got alright penetration. So against enemy armour, pardon the hiccups, it can handle alright. But at the same time, of course, at the same time begs the question that, you know, you consider what does my opponent have when you actually call it in. Because your opponent mostly has infantry, your Pumas are not going to have a vast effect. When you really need some kind of armour, some kind of vehicle for them to sort of really get in there and get traction. I mean, they'll still occasionally kill something, but it's not going to be on a very effective level. And of course, the question be, you know, couldn't you have gotten something else perhaps a bit better, a bit more useful? But again, versus vehicle, for example, against medium armour, you can actually use it to harass, and that's to some extent probably what it does best. Because again, it doesn't have a lot of health either. I mean, it's got more health than a regular armoured car, but it doesn't have a lot of armour either. So essentially what you want to use its great mobility, Panzer, and of course the fact it has a decent range with a sort of decent penetration to harass your opponent's armour. Strike from the side, strike from such, keep at range, don't get within range. Against tanks, for example, you can usually, you know, engage them safely, unless of course you get caught up in an anti-tank grenade or something less than fun. Versus tank destroyers and knights, you're going to be in trouble if you get caught in front of them. Same with field gunners, of course, that's one thing about the Puma. You can't really use it for head-on assaults. If you use it to sort of try and attack your opponent head-on, it's not going to end up very well. In fact, it's going to end up quite the opposite. Because again, it can't withstand a lot of shots, it can't clear out infantry very much, so it's not really much of an assault vehicle either. It's basically there to annoy your opponent's armour, maybe take out a tank here and there, if he's being uncautious, maybe a piece of rocket artillery or some other light artillery, but again, you know, it's to some extent it does lack some punch, and that does limit its capabilities. It's largely sort of within the realm of annoying your opponent's armoured movements, if you will. Again, I mean, at a reasonable price you can sort of get several of them quick and sort of, again, you know, deal with your opponents quite nicely, armour. But of course, again, if your opponent then realises and pushes in with some infantry, of course you might find your Pumas all of a sudden being a bit of a waste of resources. Guards infantry, for example, probably won't have that hard a time of it, for example. And again, as you might notice our opponent here doing, or German player, he's sort of milling them about. He's not entirely sure what to do with them, because again, there's not exactly a lot to do with them at the moment. We have one heavy tank destroyer, and he's probably going to have to sort of manoeuvre up on them. Let's see if that actually happens, because then we can sort of see the Puma in action. I mean, it's a bit interesting, of course, to also show up, but I mean, really hadn't any other Puma replays, and I sort of want to get it over quickly. Of course, I can do an update if something changed, but there we go, you know, gets a hit off. Actually does some alright damage. Again, as you might notice, they do have a decent rate of fire, combined with a range. So, I mean, overall, again, if you maneuver them correctly, you can actually do some nasty work there towards enemy armour. And again, no, they're one hit, and it's practically always down to half health. But again, no, here in this case, using it to swarm, but overall, quickly going through the H-85 thanks to its high rate of fire. But again, overall, versus the infantry, he didn't exactly get a lot of kills, despite, you know, being 3 of them and firing quite a bit here. So that also really, you know, highlights one of the major weaknesses. They are simply put not going to wreck your opponent's infantry, and this maybe they get some efficiency and thus higher accuracy and some of that weapon potency, whatever that specifically is. I don't have the stats on that, I'm afraid, yet. So in that department you sort of see, you know, the strengths and weaknesses of the Puma. Again, it has a high rate of fire, it has decent penetration, decent range, decent mobility, but it can't do anything against infantry, and it can't really withstand much damage before it goes kaboom. So in that department, you'd rather have it there, I would imagine. But again, in particular, the target weak point, you can sort of really then begin harassing your opponent's armor. And to a certain extent, that is probably what you want to use the Puma for. Harassment of the enemy's tanks, harassment of the enemy's vehicles, staying at range, striking, getting away if things get a bit too unpleasant, and then, you know, hit somewhere else. So that is something to keep in mind. But overall, I hope this gave people a bit of a better idea here of the Puma, of the Schwerer Panzerspähwagen, and its capabilities. Again, not very durable, not very thickly armoured. On the other hand, highly mobile, decent range, decent rate of fire, and decent penetration. Overall, meaning again, it's going to do quite nicely in sort of harassing your opponent's armor, staying at range, sneaking about, causing that frustration. But again, if you ever have a sort of charge of position with them, you're going to end up in a very miserable state because they're not going to be able to pull it off. And again, versus infantry, their capabilities are going to be limited. They're not going to be, say, making quite the splash that another armored car might make, or a Panzer IV command tank which is also available, or a pair of assault guns. So of course that is also vital to keep in mind. But again, if you then sort of use the high mobility with the range and the rate of fire, you can be able to sort of, you know, actually frustrate your opponent's armoured movements quite a bit and force them to be a lot more cautious, because if he rushes out a tank on its own, you can, for example, quickly outmaneuver him with the Pumas and knock it out. And that's really, again, where the Puma is at its peak. And of course, don't forget, you know, to use the Panzer Tactician to sort of help get it out of a sticky situation. Because, again, it's not a durable vehicle. It will go down quickly if you're not careful. So, this is Imperial Dane saying cheers. Hopefully you've learned something from this. Hopefully you've gotten a clear idea of the Puma and how to use it and how to deal with it. This is Imperial Dane wishing you all a good day.